Hi everyone and welcome back to Explore Rock Art. My name is Agustina, I'm an archaeologist and a teacher, and in this series we'll be learning together about this mind-blowing cultural heritage we know as rock art. Now if you missed our past video, here's a quick recap. When we talk about rock art, we're talking about those images made by humans in the past on different types of rock surfaces across the world. Some were painted, others carved. Unique to each culture, to each time period, these fascinating images are as diverse as the groups that made them. In today's video, we shall begin to decipher what can these images tell us and what questions can help guide our interpretations. So let's get to it. Archaeologists studying these images can access a lot of the decisions that people had to make in the process of creating them. Today we're going to be looking into one of those decisions that can help jumpstart our journey back in time. And it starts with a very simple question. What? What did they choose to represent? Not every little aspect of past lives was depicted in the images left behind. In fact, the themes chosen are often quite restricted within each style of rock art. And we need to understand that creating these images often required effort and resources not necessarily involved in basic survival. So understanding what aspects of their world, either real or perceived, these groups are deeming significant or important enough to represent is crucial when trying to understand these groups, these individuals. But now here's the tricky part. When we look at these images today, our first instinct is often to interpret what it is that we see. We try and provide meaning behind these representations. But we need to be very, very careful in that process, not to impose onto the images our own worldviews. Here's my favorite example. When we look at this image, at this symbol, more often than not, our first thought is to say it's an arrow. Today we use it as an almost universal symbol. However, in some rock art sites with this representation, as soon as you start walking around a bit and looking at the ground, you find that there's something else in nature that looks exactly the same. Bird tracks. We find these tracks on the ground that tell you of the undeniable presence of a bird without actually seeing it. Nature already represents things that are then likely mimicked. So in this specific context, in that particular site, that symbol is more likely alluding to the presence of a bird than portraying an arrow. So before jumping into conclusions and establishing biased interpretations, we need to start small, with objective descriptions, and then articulate that information, connect that information with the rest of the archaeological data, as well as information regarding the environment, the features in nature to which these groups have been exposed to, and if we're lucky and privileged enough to have it, ethnographic data. Rock art is incredibly diverse. Across the world, we have representations of humans, animals, plants, objects, buildings, mythical creatures, as well as a broad array of geometric or abstract representations, which includes dots, circles, lines, spirals, and so many others. When we have human representations, to which researchers often refer to as anthropomorphic figures from the ancient Greek terms meaning human in shape, we might get the opportunity to learn about three things: context of use and wear of artifacts, social dynamics, and intangible heritage. Let me explain. Human representations are sometimes depicted wearing clothing or ornaments such as bracelets or headdresses. In other cases, they're represented carrying or using particular objects such as weapons or bags, staffs, tools. This information can help provide better context to particular archaeological finds. They can help us understand a bit more about how these specific artifacts were used, and in that way, they can help generate expectations and hypotheses about the rest of the archaeological finds corresponding to that particular society. And many of these artifacts, such as clothing or bags or ornaments, were likely made from organic material, leather, bone, feathers, which unfortunately means that they do not always survive the test of time. So sometimes these images can tell us about things otherwise lost forever due to poor conservation. These human figures can also be portraying activities such as dances or rituals or hunting parties, all of which can help us read the archaeological record better. It can also help us spark new ideas otherwise hard to associate with a specific society, and in many cases, they allow us to bring back to life the history of these people. They laughed, they feared, they danced, they shared stories, taught new generations, prayed, dreamed and played. But unfortunately, a lot of these activities do not leave material evidence behind for us archaeologists to find. So sometimes, scenes representing their lives offer us unique glimpses into the past, otherwise impossible to access. And finally, the combination between the activities portrayed and the objects with which certain individuals are depicted can provide clues as to different roles in society, divisions in society, hierarchies. For instance, a particular individual portrayed with complex attires or with holding objects of power such as a staff or a scepter could be likely representing a leader or a shaman maybe. The most common theme represented in rock art across the globe is animals. The earliest figurative representations in the world are portrayals of wildlife, and they continue to be in the spotlight throughout time. And again, which animals are represented and which ones are not offers a lot of information regarding the relationship between them and societies involved. When drawn together, human and animals in some sort of scene, we can identify specific relationships, such as a preferred prey for a specific hunting practice. However, even if we don't have that direct representation, we can still get a lot of information by articulating the images represented and the rest of the existing archaeological data from the site. When we compare those animals painted or carved with the animal remains from excavations, we find that some societies chose to represent their main source of food, their main source of clothing. Yes, in those cases, that which they're deeming significant or important, yes, is strongly related to their economic dynamics. They represent what they hunt, their source of food, their source of energy, of life. In some cases, however, when we do that same comparison between the images and the excavated remains, we find that those animals represented are not the same as the ones consumed. So this opens up a whole new bunch of questions. If they're not important as a source of sustenance, what role did they play? Were they feared? Were they venerated? What we do know is that they played an important part, either socially or symbolically. Sometimes the animals represented could also tell us about climate change. A clear example is the presence of extinct fauna that tell us about different landscapes and environments to the ones that we have today. And in turn, they can thereby help us interpret how old some of these images might be. A very particular and fascinating type of representation, which is not as rare as one might expect, is the presence of hybrid or chimeric creatures, half human, half animal, or a combination of at least two recognizable different species into one creature. These images are often interpreted as mythological creatures or transitions in shamanic practices, definitely within the realm of ideology or beliefs of the world. A human with attributes of a particular animal can be representing a more powerful individual, maybe a warrior, a leader, a shaman, even a deity. Now, they're no longer choosing to represent nature as it is seen. Instead, they're representing it as it is perceived, as it is understood, as it is imagined. Though a big part of the images in rock art are figurative, in other words, we can describe them with things we recognize from the world around us, there is a whole other realm of intriguing representations made out of geometric designs and abstract motifs, made out of symbols, lines, dots, circles, and different combinations and variations. A lot of researchers disagree with the term abstract for these types of representations, because the fact that today we don't really know what they are representing does not mean that they did not have a specific reference in the real world or a particular indisputable meaning in the past. They could be a schematic or metonymic representation of something. They could be a code, a symbol, an insignia, and so many other things. These are just a few examples of how we must approach these images etched in stone. We need to try and read them with as little bias as possible, broadening our view of past societies with every step we take. Always remembering that we cannot and should not separate rock art from the rest of the archaeological record. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share and subscribe, and join me in our next episode to find out what can location tell us about the relationship between humans and art across the globe. Thank you very much for watching and hope to see you soon.